My name is Kim Kardashian, and for as long as I can remember, the garden was the only place I ever felt safe. When the noise inside our home became too loud, when the arguments echoed through the walls, when the silence after them cut even deeper, I would slip outside and bury my hands in the earth. The soil didn't ask questions. It didn't judge me. It just welcomed me. I planted tiny seeds with shaky fingers, whispering silent hopes that maybe, just maybe, something beautiful could grow from the mess. Every sprout felt like a secret victory, a little green miracle. "Why are you always out here, Kim?" Leah's voice pierced the stillness. "Looking for your real dad or something?" I clenched my jaw, refusing to look up from the bed of seedlings I was tending. I didn't need her venom today. I never did. "At least I know where I belong," I muttered. Her laughter, sharp and mocking, echoed through the yard. Leah had always been my shadow, not in the comforting way, but in the way that blocked the light. She was my younger sister by a year, but somehow she always seemed to hold the upper hand, especially when it came to Mom and our stepdad. Leah wore charm like armor, dazzling anyone who dared look too closely. I, on the other hand, faded into the background. Quiet, studious, the girl with dirt under her nails and books under her arm. When Mom announced we were moving to a new house in hopes of a fresh start, I naively believed it. I imagined maybe, just maybe, things would change, that Leah and I could be closer, that Mom would see me, finally. But nothing changed. Leah only grew more spiteful. I poured myself into the new garden. The yard was overgrown when we arrived, but I saw potential. I cleared space, tilled the soil, and started over. Flowers, herbs, vegetables, each one planted with care and purpose. It became my sanctuary, a little patch of calm in an otherwise chaotic world. And Leah hated that. One afternoon, I returned from school and felt something was off the moment I stepped into the garden. The air felt heavier, still, silent in a wrong kind of way. Then I saw it. Crushed petals, snapped stems, uprooted roots. My heart dropped. She had done it. Leah had trampled everything, the entire garden, destroyed. My sanctuary turned into a graveyard of broken green. When Mom confronted us, Leah's crocodile tears flowed on cue. She sobbed into her hands, claiming she had no idea what happened. I was the one blamed for overreacting, for accusing without proof. As punishment, I was told to clean it up, alone. So I did. With trembling hands and tears I refused to let fall, I replanted everything, seed by seed, root by root. Rage swirled with sadness inside me, but underneath it all was something new. Determination. Leah may have ruined this garden, but she wouldn't ruin me. That was just the beginning. High school came, and while I buried myself in books and advanced classes, Leah chased attention like it was oxygen. She skipped classes, snuck out late, and somehow still managed to be adored by teachers and classmates alike. By junior year, we barely spoke, until the day everything exploded. Our English teacher, Mrs. Wilkins, had left the final exam papers on her desk unattended. The next morning, chaos erupted. The tests were gone. The entire class was in an uproar. And then, the whispers began. They followed me down the hallways like shadows. People looked at me sideways, whispered behind their lockers. And there, right at the center of it all, was Leah. She smirked, her arms folded, surrounded by her usual crew. Well, if it isn't Little Miss Perfect," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Couldn't resist, huh? Had to cheat like your loser dad." I froze. My jaw tightened. I opened my mouth to protest, but before I could say anything, Mrs. Wilkins stormed into the hall. "Kim Kardashian, come with me." Her voice was sharp, final. I barely had time to process what was happening before I was sitting in the principal's office facing a printed copy of the exam found in my locker. I didn't put it there. I had never even touched it. But none of that mattered. I was suspended, put on academic probation. A mark went on my permanent record. Mom tried to believe me, but my stepdad, not a chance. "This was bound to happen," he muttered. "Kim's always been jealous of Leah. She's just acting out." Leah sat on the couch during their argument, her expression calm, almost bored. But when our eyes met, she mouthed the words, "I'll never forget." Enjoy being a nobody. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. I could feel something hardening inside me. Not bitterness, not even sadness anymore. Resolve. I would not let her win. I would not spend the rest of my life in Leah's shadow.
I started over, not again.
I fought through the rest of high school, kept my head down, studied harder than I thought possible, graduated, got my diploma, walked across that stage like it was a battlefield and I had survived. Then I packed a suitcase and left. A new city, a small apartment, no family, just me and the idea of a second chance. And this time, I was going to build a life where Leah had no place, no control, no power. My apartment was tiny. One window, a squeaky floor, and a kitchen barely wide enough to stand in. But to me, it was freedom. For the first time in my life, I could breathe without watching my back. I could rest without listening for footsteps in the hall. And most importantly, I could plant again. It started with one small pot of basil on the windowsill, then mint, then lavender. The scent filled my kitchen, calming my nerves and filling me with something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Soon I was sneaking seeds into every free container I could find. Coffee tins, mason jars, plastic yogurt cups. My apartment became a jungle of green, alive with new beginnings. But what changed everything was the lot. Behind my building was an abandoned stretch of land, overgrown, forgotten, cracked pavement, broken fences, trash blowing in the wind. But I saw it differently. I saw rows of tomatoes, bushes of rosemary, a path lined with sunflowers. I saw beauty waiting to be claimed. So I claimed it. I spoke to the landlord. I filed paperwork with the city. I joined community forums and searched for volunteers. That's when I met Lucas. He was carrying a tray of seedlings when I first saw him. Tall, kind-eyed, and curious. "You starting a garden here?" he asked. I nodded. "Trying to." He smiled. "Need help?" From that day forward, he never left my side. Lucas became my partner in every sense of the word. We laid down soil, dug rows, pulled weeds. He taught me how to build proper raised beds, how to fix fencing, how to make compost that didn't smell like death. We laughed, a lot. He didn't ask about my past, and I didn't offer it. It was enough to be present, to create something with someone who saw me for who I was, not who I used to be. The garden grew, and so did I. Months passed. What began as a handful of plants became a full-fledged community garden. We called it the Open Route. Families brought their kids. Retirees brought stories. Artists brought music and color. The lot transformed from broken concrete to blooming life. We hosted weekend workshops, composting tutorials, herb education for school kids, even yoga in the garden on Sundays. I felt purpose again, pride, belonging. And then one summer morning, as we were setting up for our first harvest celebration, I froze. There she was. Leah, hair glossy, nails perfect, designer sunglasses pushed up into her flawless waves. She walked into the garden like she owned the place. "Kim," she said brightly, like nothing had ever happened. "Wow, this is cute." I didn't answer. Lucas stood beside me. He could feel my body go rigid. "Is everything okay?" he asked quietly. Leah took off her sunglasses. "I'm here to support my big sister. Isn't that what family does?" I swallowed hard. "What do you want?" She raised her hands. "Peace, really. I've changed, Kim. I swear. I've been following your project. I just wanted to see it in person." Lucas was watching her carefully. "So you just dropped by?" he asked. She grinned. "Well, and maybe to help?" I stared. "You want to help me now, after what you did?" Leah's smile faltered just slightly, but she recovered quickly. "I was a kid. I was stupid. I know that now. I've done a lot of work on myself. I go to therapy. I've made peace with the past. Can't we do the same?" Lucas gently touched my arm. "It's up to you," he said. Everything inside me screamed no, but part of me was tired of holding on to so much pain, so much history. Maybe letting her volunteer wouldn't destroy me. Not anymore. "Fine," I said, "but one step out of line and you're gone." Her eyes lit up. "You won't regret this." I wasn't so sure. At first, Leah played the role well. She showed up on time, wore gloves, dug holes, watered beds. She smiled for photos, shook hands with neighbors, called me sister like it tasted sweet on her tongue. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. One afternoon I caught her giving a tour to a small group of influencers, talking as if the garden was her idea. Another time, she added her name to our grant proposal draft without asking me. She took calls during volunteer meetings, posted selfies in front of flowers she never planted. She even started tagging herself as co-founder on our social media pages. I tried to ignore it. I told myself she just wanted attention. But one day, I overheard her talking to a reporter. "Yes," she said smoothly. "My sister and I started the Open Route together, but I handle most of the management now." I stormed out to the reporter mid-interview. "That's not true," I said firmly. "Leah joined us a month ago. This garden has been running for over a year." The reporter blinked. Leah's expression hardened. Later that night, she cornered me by the tomato beds. "What the hell was that?" she hissed. That was me correcting a lie. You're always so dramatic, Kim. It was just PR. No, I said, it was theft again. She stepped closer, voice low and biting. You haven't changed at all. Still bitter, still scared, still that sad little girl in the dirt. I stared at her. No, I said calmly, I'm not her anymore. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You need me, Kim. You think you built all this by yourself? I know I did, I said. She shook her head and walked off. The next morning, the grant team called. They had received an anonymous complaint. Allegations of financial mismanagement, claims that I was funneling funds. I spent the next 3 weeks fighting for my name, pulling receipts, calling vendors, rewriting reports. It was exhausting, infuriating. But in the end, I cleared it all. Lucas stood by me every step of the way. When it was over, he found me sitting in the dirt, staring at the garden beds. You okay? He asked gently. I nodded, just tired. He sat beside me. She's not your shadow anymore. I turned to him. No, she's not. I'll help you keep her out, he said, for good. I looked out at the garden, sunflowers stretching tall, herbs swaying in the breeze, and I smiled. This was mine, and no one would take it away again. Leah didn't come back after the grant fraud accusation was cleared. She didn't text, didn't call, just disappeared, like a shadow that finally understood the light had grown too bright. At first, I kept looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next twist. But as days passed, and then weeks without another blow, I realized something. She was really gone. The garden healed faster than I did. Plants were easy. You give them water, sunlight, and a little space, and they'll find a way to thrive. But hearts, they take longer. Even after everything was calm again, I kept replaying her words, her face. That moment by the tomato beds where she reminded me of every wound I had buried so deep it had roots. You're still that sad little girl in the dirt. But I wasn't. Not anymore. And I didn't need her to admit that for it to be true. One Saturday, I stood in front of our garden sign, the open route, and just stared at it. It wasn't just a name. It was a truth. We had all been broken open. Me, Lucas, the kids who came for weekend classes, the elders who sat under the mulberry tree and shared stories. We were all healing here, together. That day, I started a new tradition. We called it Saturday at sunrise. No phones, no tools, no schedule. Just people sitting together in the garden at dawn, breathing, sipping tea, being human. It started with 3 of us, then 6, then 15. And soon, it became the heartbeat of the neighborhood. Lucas and I kept growing the garden, not just physically, but spiritually. We added benches, a lending library, a seed exchange box. He even proposed under the fig tree we had planted together. It wasn't a grand gesture. It was a quiet moment, just us in the garden after a long day. I never thought I'd find someone like you, he said, taking my hand. You didn't find me, I said, smiling. You helped me find myself. He laughed softly, then pulled out a simple silver ring with a tiny vine etched around the band. Then maybe we can keep growing together. I said yes without hesitation. That fall, we held a small wedding in the garden. Close friends, neighbors, a few family members who had stood by me when no one else did. Mom came. She cried quietly in the back row. We hadn't spoken much since I moved out, but that day she hugged me and whispered, You did this. You made this life. I nodded, but I didn't say thank you, because I didn't owe her that. Forgiveness doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it just comes with peace. 1 year later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name in handwriting I hadn't seen in a long time. It was from Leah. The envelope was wrinkled. The ink had smudged in places, like maybe her hands had been shaking. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. Inside was 1 page. No excuses. No long speech. Just 5 words. I hope you're doing well. I sat down. Let the silence wrap around me. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. Just space. Like something had finally been laid down. I didn't write back. There was nothing left to say. But I folded the note and placed it under a stone at the edge of the garden. A little corner where nothing had ever quite grown right. Maybe one day it would. Maybe not. But that stone, that note, it was a reminder that not all roots stay rotten. Some simply stop growing. And that's okay. Years have passed since the first seed, since the first heartbreak, since the first time I realized that not everyone who calls themselves family knows how to love you right. And yet here I am, not just surviving, but blooming. The open root has become more than I ever imagined. What started as a forgotten lot is now a beloved landmark. We've expanded into neighboring spaces, collaborated with local schools, and even started a rooftop gardening project for seniors who can't kneel down anymore. Sometimes I walk through the paths at sunset and just listen to laughter, to stories, to silence that finally feels gentle. Lucas and I adopted a little girl last year. Her name is Ivy. Fitting, I know. She came into our lives like a whisper, quiet, delicate, eyes filled with questions and wonder. The first time she stepped into the garden, she gasped at the marigolds and immediately ran to the tomato vines. "This is magic," she said. It was. She became my new beginning. We let her paint her own garden sign. It says, "Ivy's Jungle. No grown-ups allowed unless you bring snacks." Every time I see it, I smile. She's growing strong, just like the garden, just like me. Sometimes people ask if I regret letting Leah in, even for that brief time. If I wish I had cut her off earlier, or pushed back harder, or screamed louder. But the truth is, no. Every twist in the road brought me here. Every trampled flower taught me how to replant. Every cruel word made the kind ones sweeter. And every broken piece became something I could use to build again. Stronger, wider, more welcoming than before. I don't know where Leah is now, and I don't need to. I don't look for her name online. I don't ask Mom for updates. I let her be who she is, wherever she is, and I focus on the life I've grown. Because here's what I've learned. Peace isn't pretending the past didn't happen. It's knowing it doesn't control you anymore. Tonight, Ivy and I sat on the porch while Lucas grilled vegetables nearby. The scent of rosemary filled the air. Fireflies danced around us. "I want to plant watermelon tomorrow," Ivy declared. "You got it," I said. "We'll dig deep. The roots will need space." "Like your heart," she replied, then giggled. "That's what Daddy always says." I looked over at Lucas. He smiled. And in that moment, I realized this is the garden I've been building all along. Not just in the dirt, but in my life, where love grows without fear, where kindness climbs every wall, and where even the ugliest weeds can't choke out what's meant to thrive. This is my story. Not the one Leah tried to write for me, not the one others expected. Mine. And every day I live it, I plant another seed. For healing, for hope, for all the girls out there who are still being told to clean up someone else's mess. Your garden is waiting. Start digging.